My name is Dr. Carlos Peña, and I am the Chief Regulatory Officer and Chief Quality Officer at the Jacobs Institute here in Buffalo, New York. I specialize in helping to support developers and innovators here in Buffalo, including the University at Buffalo, to advance their medical device products to patients with a particular focus on IDEs, clinical trials, and related investigational studies. In this specific session, on behalf of the UB Clinical and Translational Science Institute, with a vision to improve health and reduce health disparities in our community, we will focus on exploring what it takes for developers and innovators to study a medical device in a clinical trial here in the United States. Depending upon risk, higher risk medical devices are typically studied under what is known as an Investigation Device Exemption, or an IDE, which is the focus of today's session. Here I share with you a few products from the Office of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices, including from left to right, stroke devices all the way to neurovascular catheters. FDA has experience in moving medical devices products to the marketplace, and the purpose is not to share with you individual data sets that led to their approval, but rather that each device made it to the U.S. marketplace based on the attributes of the device, proposed indications for use, safety and effectiveness profile, and interestingly, many of these products had been studied under an IDE. The most common way for developers and innovators to understand their responsibilities in conducting a medical device study is to seek FDA's guidance, and the agency uses guidance such as the one presented here to communicate its policies. Here I show you a policy document on first-in-human studies where the U.S. and specifically FDA has made transparent what it takes to initiate these types of studies in the United States. Take-home message here is that read the guidance. Nighttime if you have trouble sleeping too, but many of the medical device work done here in Buffalo can lead to a clinical study, including those studies under IDE with oversight by the FDA. For additional background, IDE studies are generally reserved for products that have been approved for the U.S., present significant risk study, and have a number of requirements that can lead to a marketing submission. Interestingly, when developers and innovators submit an IDE to be reviewed by FDA, the agency takes about 30 days to render a decision, and I've not seen the agency miss the goal like ever. And for the folks in the drug space, the IDE is comparable to the drug IND application. In this next slide, I present a few types of medical device studies, including the Early Feasibility Study, or EFS, the Traditional Study, and the Pivotal Study types. EFS typically has less than 15 subjects. It occurs early in the device development process, and approval may be based on less non-clinical data than would be needed to support the initiation of a larger study. The Traditional Feasibility Study can move upwards to 30 or 40 patients or even higher, and pivotal studies provide the data as the basis for a marketing submission and can sometimes include a couple hundred patients. Take-home message here is that there are several approaches to taking something through a clinical study where you have a great idea for a medical device that fills a public health need. And here I would like to share with you how serious FDA is about moving devices to patients in a clinical study. In this graph, we have decreasing timelines in getting a medical device study up and running. In fiscal year 11, FY11, the median time it took to get full approval took approximately 400 plus days to fiscal years 2013, 2014, and in years 2015 to 2020, we had a reduced timeline down to a median time of 30 days. I would like to stress these are important decisions with patient safety of paramount importance, and one key change has been the interaction of FDA and its engagement with developers and innovators. Take-home message is that FDA takes IDEs seriously in getting up and running. Basic elements of an IDE, an Investigational Device Exemption, include the following: a cover letter, a report of prior investigations, a detailed device description which helps the agency understand what you propose to study, and a detailed investigational plan with purpose, protocol, risk analysis, and monitoring procedures. Similarly, one should include an informed consent document, investigator agreement, and list of investigators, IRB information, and all the labeling proposed for the device in an IDE submission. For IDE application decisions that FDA renders, there are three types of decisions. Full approval, which approves the trial for a specified number of patients and investigational sites. Approved with conditions, which allows sponsors to begin the trial if the sponsor agrees to address the conditions known as deficiencies within 45 days, and disapproval, where a trial may not start until the sponsor addresses the deficiencies identified in the review, and these are primarily focused on safety for the patients in the study. So to get devices to patients in the hospital, in the clinic, or even for use at home, it is important to work with the agency during device development to make sure both you and the FDA have the same expectations around what is needed to get to market and ultimately to patients. And the IDE process helps to get some of the most highest risk devices to the patient where it can have the biggest impact. Interestingly, there has been an uptick in IDE studies that focus on 10 to 15 subjects per trial, also referenced earlier as the EFS study design. And just last year, FDA published further information on the early feasibility EFS program and how developers and innovators can best initiate these studies in partnership with FDA. Take-home message is that US is open for EFS business. In addition, FDA has had significant success in standing up EFS studies with full approval, and the majority of studies during the first round of review. Here I share with you approval rates that are very high between 2015 and 2019, and that the success of FDA and sponsors in standing up these studies, here with a focus on neurological and physical medicine devices. So right about now, you may have questions about where do I begin with FDA. The best way to navigate the FDA's expectations is via what we call a pre-submission. Pre-submissions allow you to interact with the agency early and to shape your device strategy, pre-market submission, and business decisions in a way that facilitates clearance or approval and predictability of the device development process. You can also solicit comments from the agency, such as on study design, intended use, statistical analyses, and the regulatory pathway. If you think it's too early to contact the agency, that's the best time to contact the agency. Last, I would like to highlight that the FDA is composed of people, and here I present an organizational chart of the Medical Device Center, including the Office of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices, which is a particular interest here in Buffalo, and the Jacobs Institute. Each of the offices receive medical device submissions from sponsors and investigators, developers and innovators, especially for investigational studies or IDE submissions in the US. So a few closing remarks. 1, find out more about FDA, review the information on these slides, engage the agency, and even contact staff via phone or via in-person meetings. 2, the IDE, and in particular the EFS study, has a lot of interest from multiple stakeholders, including academia and industry, and FDA is interested in bringing these studies here to the US first. And 3, safety and effectiveness are important to FDA. As a former director at the agency, I'm happy to say there are folks at the FDA who can help you make the right decisions about your idea, and very happy to say that FDA is ready to potentially work with you in bringing your device to the US marketplace. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you a little bit more about information related to the IDE or Investigation Device Exemption process and FDA's review over this important activity.